Galaxy 666 by Pel Toro. Session 18.
Chapter 6. Oski and Bronit began rummaging through a stack of their personal gear in one of the small and strictly weight-limited capacity storage lockers at the rear of the ship. "I thought I had one," said Oski. "Yes, I remember seeing it among our junk," said Bronit. Oski triumphantly held up a small, handheld transistorized computer. It was the kind of model computer which is used in the Empire mainly as a form of amusement. You set a mathematical problem and then tried to race it. It played a game of checkers with you, and it was an expert at another form that resembled a kind of noughts and crosses. It could calculate three-dimensionally or four-dimensionally, but it was specifically designed as a toy, as a gimmick, as a piece of recreational equipment, rather than as a serious computing mechanism. Nevertheless, it was well constructed, and it had to be accurate enough to produce answers that would satisfy the minds of the keenest problem solvers. Ishklaw and Korzak were quite familiar with computers of that type, and with the battering which the little handset had received, it looked as though Bronit and Oski had used it a fair bit on their voyages together aboard the Space Greyhound. "It's not much of a substitute for an auto-astrogator," said Bronit rather brutally, "but at least it's better than nothing. We should just have to make all the calculations manually, and this will give us a chance to check the totals." He turned to Oski. "You can nearly make this darn gadget talk," he said. "You take this, Ishklaw. Korzak and myself will do the manuals." Ishklaw, Bronit, and Korzak were manning the visual and audio perceptor units, reading figures off scales as fast as they could. "Coordinates 19754-862 over 003, called Ishklaw. 9,071 3/4. 024 coordinates CBJ. Paracoordinate 198002, called Bronit. "Hypercoordinate 10467, said Korzak. "Ultra coordinate 194 over 312 over 564 over 8179, said Ishklaw. "Infer coordinate," began Bronit. 987.56, reference coordinate 1325. "Alpha reading high," said Ishklaw. "Beta scale medium," said Bronit. "Gamma steady," said Korzak. "Alpha pointer 0, beta pointer 0. "Gimel pointer -2, cut in Korzak. Oski was tickling his toy computer with the desperate fury of an accordionist trying to make himself heard at a space veterans concert, competing with 3 electro tapes and a hi-fi color organ. He was scratching away at the computer as though it were part of his own body that was particularly sensitive and had been invaded by fleas. There was a particularly virulent flea on an odd little world round one of the less significant planets of Galaxy 297. It was known as a machi. Ishklaw looked over at Oski for a second and grinned. "You're scratching that computer as if it were covered with machis," he said. "Oh," said Oski. "Have you ever gotten tangled up with those brutes?" "No thanks," said Ishklaw. "But I knew an old space veteran once who did. He's still got the twitch." "They're hellish things," said Bronit. His face clouded over momentarily. "Hellish things," he repeated. "By the 7 green moons, I'd rather take on an Altarian Gasha beast and get mixed up with those little devils. There's nothing much you can do when the Machis are on the warpath. While they lack in size, they more than make up for in ferocity, persistence, and numerical superiority." "Okay, I'm ready for the next set of figures," said Oski. "According to my box of tricks, only about 2/3 of what you've given me makes any kind of sense." "Do you wonder?" asked Ishklaw. Oski shook his head. "Not really." He looked sullen and angry. "Does anything make sense out here? The whole thing is crazy. Phony coordinates, things that shouldn't happen." "There's only one explanation that ever seemed to make any sense to me," said Korzak, between reeling off strings of figures. "Make any sense of what?" said Ishklaw, also taking a breather between numbers. "I mean about this galaxy," replied Korzak. "Did you ever hear the negative space theory? The negative matter theory? If Galaxy 666 is negative, it wouldn't be possible to get anywhere near it at all," said Bronit. "I think he's right," said Ishklaw. Bronit and Korzak both looked at the speaker. "Who's right?" asked Korzak with a grin. Ishklaw raised one eyebrow. "You know what I mean," he said. Bronit looked at him. "You mean you think I'm right?" "Yes." He looked back at Ishklaw again. "How did Korzak know what you meant before you said anything?" Ishklaw shrugged and laughed. "We worked together a long time. We went through college together, through Neophyte Star School together. There's quite a little bond between us." "Well, there's a bond between every humanoid fighting space," said Bronit. "Partners in distress and all that kind of sentiment. Fellow passengers to the grave, you know. Cheerful thought, said Oski, looking up from the computer that he was still rattling. Bronit looked at his fellow crewman. Oski, he said, you look about as feverish as a 20th century typist trying to pass a speed examination on one of those kids' typewriters in which they used to turn around a little wheel at the top and then hit the key. It was a 15-second job to type one letter. Yeah, I've seen 'em, returned Ishclaw. Cute little pieces of mechanism. They're still hanging around in the museums. I wish you guys would get on with some preservation techniques for us. If you knew the kind of results that were coming up on this computer, you'd be leaping out of those windows. I can't imagine, said Bronit. I know that I've just filed in 3 sets of absolutely diverse coordinates that made no sense at all. Some of mine seemed a bit cockeyed, said Ishclaw. Korzak was laughing. I don't know why we're bothering, he said. None of these coordinates is making any sense. 4 2s are 1, 5 2s are 100. There's just no pattern. Except the same peculiar pattern that exists throughout this galaxy, said Ishclaw. True, but how can pure randomness be a pattern? I don't know, replied Ishclaw. I just don't know. I wish I did. When we find the answer to that, we shall be some way toward solving the enigma of the apocryphal planet itself. We shall be some way toward grappling with the enigma of Galaxy 666.
Here ends Session 18.